Welcome to another episode of the International Volleyball Academy, where we guide you step by step to becoming better volleyball players. In previous episodes, we discussed one important volleyball rule. The serve is the first attack. And every attack requires a response from the opponent. Though one might think of this as defense, volleyball players understand defense as the situation after the opponent's attack, not after the serve. Instead, we refer to it as attack formation, and its foundation is a good serve reception, which we'll focus on in today's episode.
First, let's recap what we already know. Proper technique requires distinguishing between receiving a slow-flying ball and a fast-flying ball. We call these a free ball and a fast ball, respectively. Receiving a serve, or fast ball, involves absorbing the speed of the ball. When receiving the ball low beside the body, we teach players to move their center of gravity toward the ball. If the ball is above the head, we prefer a backward movement combined with rotation around the supporting foot. Even during rotation, we try to maintain the same angle between the torso and arms. We also prepare players for situations where they may have to fall while receiving. Players must master all types of receptions.
Now let's get into today's topic. Today we're focusing on individual reception, while combinations and systems will be covered in future episodes. The key distinction lies between receiving a jump serve and a float serve. We'll start with the floating serve since it occurs in both men's and women's volleyball.
The initial positioning for receiving a floating serve can vary. Players are usually aligned in a single line, though it's not uncommon for some to prefer a different starting position from their teammates.
We've found that standing closer to the net is more advantageous because a serve aimed at the body is easier to manage than one falling in front of the player. Standing too far from the net increases this risk. For example, some players, like the Japanese, prefer to stand further back. Some start further from the net and move forward during the toss, while others step back. It's also important to note that men tend to stand closer, as their arm strength allows them to handle the ball with more power.
Before we move on to the actual action, let's take a look at how players prepare for reception. Experienced players stand calmly before the serve, because the critical activation movement begins with a split step, which occurs after the serve. We'll get to that shortly. However, preparation also involves certain rituals that are mostly psychological, such as ideomotor preparation, relaxation, or calming oneself, or social interaction with teammates through communication or physical touch. The player is now prepared, the serve happens, and because of its speed, it's unrealistic to think the player will have time for significant movements before the point of contact. Nevertheless, some movement does occur. An important moment is the split step, an activation movement of the legs that adds dynamics to the subsequent action. Before and after the split step, there may be some movement or none at all, either forward or backward. Sometimes only a minor adjustment of stance is needed. Now comes the split step. It works based on a biomechanical principle called the stretch-shortening cycle. The player's feet leave the ground in a mini jump, gaining potential energy. When the feet touch the ground again, this potential energy quickly converts into kinetic energy, which the player uses to accelerate their next movement. You might remember the exercises from episodes 3 and 4, which will be helpful here. Don't hesitate to repeat them if the split step isn't working well or as part of warm-up.
As mentioned earlier, after the split step, there may be further movement, a fall, or simply contact with the ball without changing position. The timing of the split step is crucial. It's basic physics. The faster the ball travels, the earlier the split step needs to happen. So, unlike jump serves or digging, the split step for receiving a float, serve typically happens when the ball is about halfway between the server and the receiver. The split step doesn't always involve both feet jumping. Sometimes it's just a step from one foot to the other. After the split step, further movement may occur, but the ball can also be played from a stationary position. Some coaches mistakenly insist that the player must always be in a 2-foot stance when contacting the ball. However, this is often impossible due to the speed of the serve. When a float serve comes in at speeds of 60 to 80 kilometers per hour or 37 to 50 miles per hour, players are forced to react in various positions, on one foot with torso rotation, low in front of the body, kneeling, or even airborne with both feet off the ground. As you can see with this player, even though she does everything to get into the right contact position, she still ends up receiving the ball without foot support.
We incorporate these insights into our training for receiving float serves. We want players to be prepared for any situation, equipping them with various footwork techniques. As mentioned, the basics were covered in episodes 3, 4, and 10. In this example, after the split step, the player should shift their weight onto their left foot, freeing the right foot to take a small step to the right where the ball is headed. This brings the center of gravity closer to the point of contact. However, this doesn't happen here. The player shifts their weight onto the right foot, which means they can only move their shoulders and arms to the right. Conversely, in this example, the right foot is free to move, allowing the player to shift their center of gravity toward the ball. That's the desired outcome. The same applies to the left side. As we've mentioned, reception is an act of absorbing. Now let's move on to the actual ball contact. The player absorbs the impact in different ways, by moving backward, using only the arms, or by straightening the torso. Sometimes players must receive while falling, but we'll cover that in more detail when discussing jump serves in the next episode. From episode 4, we know that it's important to aim the ball correctly by positioning the arms. We also emphasize that players should keep their arms together even after contact, which relates to movement programming. But more on that another time. For now, just remember to keep aiming with your arms toward the target after contact. In training, focus on arm positioning, aiming at the target, and keeping the arms together after contact.
And then there's overhead reception, which we learned in episode 16. Remember? That was when we covered the overhead technique used in digging, which is almost identical to reception. It's mainly used in men's volleyball, but is increasingly seen in women's volleyball as well.
Training serve reception doesn't leave much room for creativity. In pairs, we throw or simulate floating serves from the ground or a jump. After that, it's a matter of practicing thousands of successful and unsuccessful attempts to receive real floating serves, including overhead receptions aimed at the desired location.
Float serve reception occurs mainly in women's volleyball and less often in men's. The most advantageous starting position is closer to the net. The split step is a leg activation movement that adds dynamics to the following action. There may or may not be movement before and after the split step. The split step generally occurs when the ball is halfway between the server and the receiver. With a ball speed of 60 to 80 kilometers per hour or 37 to 50 miles per hour, players must react in various positions. Players absorb the ball in different ways, by moving backward, using only their arms, or straightening their torso. Falling while receiving is also inevitable. Players aim with their arms at the target, keeping their arms together even after contact. Overhead reception is technically similar to digging and occurs mainly in men's volleyball.
And that's all for today. Next time, we will look at receiving jump serves, which is the foundation of success in offensive play, especially in men's volleyball. If you enjoy our show, don't forget to subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and we'll answer them all. Take care.